my last video, I talked about my first ever game jam. That game jam actually went surprisingly well, so I was pretty excited to join another one. Unfortunately, this one did not go nearly as smoothly. So after my last jam ended, I was looking through the game jams listed on itch.io trying to figure out which jam I wanted to enter next. And one of them that caught my eye was the Godot Wild Jam. Partially just because I've been using the Godot game engine, so I thought it might be kind of interesting to participate in a jam where everyone was using the same engine. But this game jam also had a bit of an interesting gimmick. In addition to having a theme like most game jams do, they also have 3 wildcards. These wildcards are optional, so you don't have to use them, but they're basically just like additional limitations or inspirations you can use to come up with your game. This game jam also lasted 10 days, which was a lot more time than the 3-day jam that I did the first time. I kind of felt like this was both a pro and a con because it would give me more time to make my game, but it also meant I would have to work around my work schedule and things like that. And ultimately, that actually ended up being a pretty big factor as to why I ended up failing in this game jam. But I signed up for this jam, and once it started, they revealed the theme as Tower. And they also revealed the 3 wildcards, which remember are optional, so you don't have to use all of them or any of them if you don't want to. The first wildcard was Did You Know, which was basically about incorporating some fun facts into your game. This one really didn't interest me that much, so I kind of just ignored it. Another of the wildcards was, redundantly, Wildcard. This basically let you pick from any of the previous Godot Wild Jams, and this was the 73rd Godot Wild Jam, so there were a lot to choose from. For this one, I thought I might be able to do something with it just because there were so many options, but I kind of just put it on the back burner and thought maybe after I had sort of my core gameplay mechanics in place, then I could go back and try to find something interesting to add. The other wildcard, though, was Warp Speed. This was to include a teleportation or a fast travel mechanic in your game. This one sounded interesting to me, so I started brainstorming any kind of game I could come up with that involved both the theme of Tower as well as the wildcard Warp Speed. Initially, to me, the obvious choice for any game jam with the theme of Tower would be a tower defense game. And I actually really like tower defense games. I've played an embarrassing amount of Bloons TD6. But I couldn't really come up with any interesting way to incorporate Warp Speed with a tower defense game. After continuing to brainstorm, I eventually came up with the idea of a 2D platformer game using a portal gun. Kind of like a 2D version of Portal, but to incorporate the theme of tower, I thought I could make it where each level was like a floor of a tower, and you were trying to climb to the top of that tower to escape. And you would just use the portal gun to kind of platform your way across to get to like the stairs. And then once you got to the roof, you would maybe have to get to like a helicopter or something to escape. But of course, this is all just ideas and things that I came up in the brainstorming phase because I never actually completed my game. Like I said, this game jam lasted 10 days, and it just so happened that the first few days of the game jam sort of coincided with a very busy time for me at work. I had some deadlines and stuff going on that was just making me work longer hours, and I was just kind of stressed out. So I just didn't have a lot of time to put into working on my game for the game jam in those first few days. And then once I finally did get some time to work on my game, I was actually having some pretty big problems figuring out some very basic game mechanics that I wanted to implement. Remember, I'm a total noob at all this stuff, so anytime I'm making a game, I'm usually figuring out a lot of this stuff for the very first time. And for this game, I was trying to make like a laser sight for my portal gun. It was supposed to be a raycast that would point toward the mouse, and then you could click to place a portal on the first wall that the raycast collided with. This was the first time I had ever used raycast though, and it was not going well. Between work and life just taking up a lot of my time, as well as my struggles of figuring out how to do this basic thing with the raycast, I was pretty disappointed to find myself about halfway through the time limit of the game jam, and I still didn't even have this very basic mechanic of my game figured out. I did eventually figure it out and get the whole raycast thing working, but at that point, there were only a few days left in the game jam, and I just didn't think I was going to be able to make all the levels and implement everything I wanted to do for this game. So I ended up dropping out of the game jam. Even though this game jam didn't really work out for me, I don't regret it. I still think it was worth the time and effort to figure out how these raycasts work. Whenever I spend any time working on a game, even if the game sucks or I never actually finish it, I'm still learning and figuring out how to do things that I didn't know how to do before. I think game jams are great because the theme and whatever other limitations that particular game jam might have in place, they force you to kind of figure out and think of things that you may not have considered before. I never would have even considered anything like a portal gun or any kind of mechanic like that if it wasn't for that warp speed wildcard in this game jam. So if you're a newbie game dev like me, obviously take my advice with a grain of salt because I'm the farthest thing from an expert you could possibly be, but I would recommend checking out as many game jams as you can. Even if you don't have time to finish your game or if you don't think your game is going to be good enough, worst case scenario, you can just choose to drop out of the game jam or not submit your game at any point. This isn't school. Nobody is grading you or keeping a permanent record of all your successes and failures. This is all just about learning and improving and sparking your own creativity. If you don't have time to actually build a whole game for a game jam, just looking at the theme and sort of brainstorming and thinking about what you might make for that game jam if you did have time, that could spark some idea that you would have never thought about otherwise. Maybe you won't come up with anything and finish a game for that particular game jam, but it might inspire some idea for a game you could make in the future. I plan on joining more game jams, and I hope I can actually complete a game for my next one, but even if I fail, I feel like I'm still learning and improving. And honestly, that's kind of the whole point.